and I welcome Sir Keir Starmer to the studio. It's been a privilege having you coming in to call Sir Keir. I have to say, I've rarely seen you in such exuberant form. This campaigning clearly suits you. Good morning.
I'm enjoying it, Nick, and thank you for having me on again. Because we've worked for 4.5 years for this. We've waited 4.5 years for this, and now we get the chance to go out there and make our case.
And it was frustrating when you took over because you couldn't actually talk to anyone.
It was really frustrating because I had to sort of get known. I couldn't travel. I couldn't speak to anyone. Even when the restrictions were lifted, the most I could do was groups of 6, 1 yard or 2 yards apart with a mask on. It's not the ideal circumstances.
Well,
and of course, during COVID, I took the decision that the country probably didn't want to see too much party politics because we were going through something very difficult. But look, that does feel like quite a long time ago now. We are in this race, and there are individual fights in every constituency still to be had in this election, and polls don't predict the future. We have to fight for every vote.
Get your headphones on. We're coming to the first question, and it's Michelle in Reigate. Michelle, you're through to Sir Keir Starmer. Morning.
Good morning.
Hello, Michelle.
Hi, Keir. I'm the head teacher of Moonhall School, which is a specialist school where 100% of my pupils have a diagnosed special educational need. 30% of my pupils don't have an educational healthcare plan to exempt them from the VAT charge and would be forced into the state sector where we know that their needs cannot be met. To note, these families send their child to my school out of necessity for their child. Has Sir Keir fully thought this policy through, and does he know what the true impact of these plans could be on these vulnerable children and indeed their families who have already been through a traumatic time simply fighting for what their child needs?
This is, of course, adding VAT on school fees. Michelle, stay on the line. Sir Keir Starmer.
Yeah, Michelle, let me just set out what our policy is and then come to the point you rightly make about special needs. The policy is to recruit 6,500 teachers to our state secondary schools in subjects like maths, because we don't have those teachers there. And many people listening, parents listening, will be familiar with maths at our state secondaries being taught by supply teachers, by PE teachers. And for me, that's not acceptable. We have to fill those spaces. And we will get rid of the VAT break on private schools in order to pay for it, Michelle, because money is tight. We don't have a magic wand, and we have to fully cost and fully fund everything that we do. On the question of special educational needs, because this is a serious issue, Michelle, and I do take it really seriously, we have put in place for our plan an exemption for anyone with special educational needs who's on a plan that requires them to be in a different kind of school. If that's a private school, then that then means they're exempt.
Plan, Sir Keir, is it Education, Health and Care Plan, EHC
Yeah,
plan?
so if it's part of the plan, and the plan, because of the particular needs, can only be met, let's say, in a private school,
yes,
then that child or that fee is exempt from our scheme, and therefore they are outside of the change that we're making. So, Michelle, that would account for a number of the people that...
But not all of them.
But not, I think... I mean, Michelle, you're, I think, talking about people who haven't necessarily got a plan like that.
Well, let's get Michelle
But certainly the way we've done it, Michelle, is to say if there is a plan, then you're exempt.
Let me just give some numbers before I get Michelle back in. The number of pupils receiving EHC at SEND schools, 7,600 pupils at private schools get SEND support with EHC. 103,000 do not, Sir Keir. That 7,600 will be catered for, 103,000 will not. What does Labour plan to do about that?
Well, Nick, we've, where there is a plan in place, we will put the exemption in place. Where there isn't a plan, then that exemption doesn't apply.
Right, but you talk about these new maths teachers. Nick Robinson worked out that that's about a third of a teacher for each school.
No, Nick, he did put that to me. But
and it was true. He'd worked out the number of schools, 6,500. They've each got a third of a teacher.
This is specifically targeted at the teachers that are missing in the core subjects like maths. So it's not a question of lots and lots of extra teachers for all subjects. It's specifically for the subjects that are missing. Look, and Nick, just let me, because maths is really important for our youngsters. If you're
14... You can't have a third of a maths teacher, Sir Keir.
No, but we put them in the schools where there's a problem with the maths teacher, and that will be some schools, not all schools.
But it's also to supply 3,000 nurseries and mental health care. I mean, how is the money going to stretch that far?
Well, the money is perfectly fully costed in our manifesto. It's all there. But Nick,
It's
let me...
relatively small, 1.3 billion, relatively small to provide for all of this.
Well, it is a lot of money, actually, £1.3 billion. It's fully costed for both the teachers that we need and the mental health. But look, I'm not going to pretend there's lots of money around. The economy's been badly damaged. Nick, I just want to finish the point on maths because I do think it's really important.
Okay, then I will go back to the head.
If in a state secondary school you don't have a maths teacher to teach maths and you don't do well in maths, that is not something for that child who's 13, 14, 15 as a sort of 1 year budgeting problem. It's something they carry with them for the rest of their lives.
Okay.
It makes it harder to get into sixth form or college. And for apprentices, sometimes it's very hard to get onto apprenticeship without maths. So this is a lifelong, challenge for those that don't have it.
Mike in Berkshire. I'm in a marginal Berkshire seat. I've given up on the Tories. I would be minded to give Labour a chance, but I seem to be one of those people the Labour have chosen to despise. I'm a moderately successful, aspirational parent who's elected to choose private education. VAT at 20% feels like a super tax on me. He is not alone. The head teacher of the school that your wife attended says this will cause significant disruption for children forced to leave school, but we're even more concerned about the capacity of local schools. The head of the school that you attended, Reigate Grammar, says this will inevitably lead to thousands of children going to already oversubscribed state schools. How come you know better than all these teachers?
Well, Nick, firstly, I've got nothing against private schools, and I do understand that many parents save hard and work hard to send their children to private schools because they have real aspiration for them. But I also understand that all parents have aspiration for their children, including parents who send their children to a state school. And I want to make sure that every single child, wherever they come from, whatever their background, has the opportunity to get on in life and that feels that success belongs to them. It's a tough choice. There isn't a lot of money around, but it's a choice we've made to ensure that we have the teachers we need in our state secondary schools. It's a tough choice.
Final word from the head of a school, which I think is in the town that your school was at. Michelle, your final word to Sir Keir on this, and I must move on. Michelle.
So, Keir, I have written to you twice and you haven't replied. I've also written to Bridget Phillipson, no reply. I really, really question that the Labour Party do not care about these children. I think it's blind ignorance to push through with this plan and avoid speaking to those in the sector, such as myself, who have this expertise. And I honestly believe that your response to this question simply highlights that Labour does not care about SEN children when you think that they can just go back into the state sector despite the state sector not being able to meet their needs.
I must allow Sir Keir a final response.
Well, Michelle, we do care.
We'll pass your address across to Michelle, to Sir Keir's people.
We do care, Michelle, and I want every single child, whether they go to private or state school, to have the same opportunities. It really matters to me. But Michelle, on the first issue you raised, I don't know why you haven't had a reply. Can I apologise to you for that? And Michelle, one thing that will come out of this is you will get a reply very quickly. Apologies. Somehow in the system that hasn't been picked up. But Michelle, that's not intended to be discourteous. I will now make sure that you get that. Firstly, I read your letters and that you get a full reply. So apologies there, Michelle.
Those 103,000 pupils, Sir Keir, who do not get that help, I can hand you the literature here if you the special educational needs. 103,000 will not get the help they need. I'm happy for you to take that document.
Nick, where there's a plan in place that's required, then they are exempt.
All right. Well, if you read that. Let's move on. Thank you, Michelle. Good luck with your pupils. Connor's in Manchester. Connor, you're on the radio. Go ahead. Good morning.
Morning, Nick. Morning, Sir Keir. I've just got a question.
Connor.
Morning. I'm a left-leaning voter, but I'm considering other parties because I don't feel that Labour is being strong enough on things like Brexit. So my question is if Labour is adamant on keeping Brexit and not rejoining the single market, what do you think the actual benefits of Brexit are, and where do you see our relationship with the EU in the future?
Yeah, Connor, look, firstly, on... very respectful of the choice that you'll make on the 4th of July, so not trying to tell you how to vote, but it is going to be a straight choice at this election, either to continue with the Tories in control. We've had 14 years now of chaos and division and failure, in my view. That's one choice. I don't think they're going to change. This campaign has shown that chaos and division are still part and parcel of their package. So that's not going to change. That's what you will wake up to on the 5th of July, unless you take the other route, which is to choose a Labour government which will turn the page and begin to rebuild our country. They are that's the only outcome or the only stark choice. So carry on as we are. Or turn the corner. On the question of Brexit, Conor, obviously, as you probably know, I voted Remain and campaigned to Remain, but we have left the EU and we're not rejoining. And that means that we're not going to rejoin the single market or customs union or reintroduce freedom of movement.
So what would you look to? We would look to improve our trading relationships, says your colleague Rachel Reeves. What does that mean?
What that means, Conor and Nick, is this, that I think the deal we've got is a botched deal. Talk to any business. I was at Southampton Port yesterday, talked to anyone who works at the border, and they will say that they've now got all sorts of checks and balances that aren't necessary, that they think can be improved. I'm in the business of making it easier for people to trade and to
what would you
succeed.
Seek to change?
So we would seek a better agreement. Obviously, this would have to be negotiated.
Better in what areas?
In trade, so that it's easier for businesses. I want it to be better in things like research and development, and I want it to be better on security, because I think post the Ukraine or during the Ukraine conflict, it's become clear that we can do more work with our EU partners when it comes to defence and security. I would also add to that list, Nick, the taking down of the vile gangs that are running the trade, the vile trade of putting people in boats to go across the small boats to go across the channel. At the moment, if we don't have the wherewithal, if we're on a joint investigation, joint project with them, for the UK to lead on it, and I think that we can do better than that. So those are the areas, Conor, where I genuinely think we can make some real progress. But I'd say at the end, when it comes to the ballot, it is a straight choice, Conor.
OK, Conor, thank you. Matthew's in Kiel. Matthew, you're through to Sir Keir. Go ahead. Morning to you.
Morning.
Morning, Matthew.
Morning. I'm 23 and I graduate from medical school in July. I start working as a junior doctor in August. I'll be entering into a junior doctor workforce that feels devalued, dejected and disrespected. I think everyone wants to leave the NHS and go to Australia and New Zealand. It's all well and good saying you're going to train more doctors who have fewer extra 40k appointments per week, but doctors are leaving in their droves. So Keir, I want to know, how will you address the workforce retention crisis? And B, how are you going to settle the junior doctor dispute?
Yeah, on the retention crisis, we need to have better respect for our doctors and everybody in the NHS, Matthew. And on the
what does that mean, better respect?
Simply this, Nick.
I respect my doctor and my consultants already.
Yeah, but let me give the best example I can, which is a Prime Minister who stands up 18 months ago and says, I'm going to reduce the waiting lists. And he says, I'm going to be personally held to account for that. It's my promise to you. Hold me to account. Right. The waiting list was 7.2 million. They're now 7.5 million. When he's now asked, well, you said you get the list down, he says it's all the fault of the NHS staff. That is highly disrespectful. And I think he found that when he did the debate last week and was confronted by a junior doctor. So, Matthew, we will not operate in that way. On the junior doctor dispute, Matthew, you raised that, and let me deal with it, because it is shocking that it's dragged on so long. We've had months and months and months now where both the doctors and the government have said, well, we want a deal, but we're not going into the room first to negotiate a deal. We would take a different approach. We would firstly, and Wes Streeting, the shadow Health Secretary, has made this very clear. We would say to the doctors, don't strike during the election campaign, because we're very close now to the opportunity for a different approach with the Labour government if we get over the line. So don't strike, because that causes all sorts of issues inevitably for patients. So we are asking the doctors to call that action off. So but what Wes Streeting has said is he will negotiate, he will pick up the phone and start the discussion. Now, I know the junior doctors' starting position, as it were, is 35%. We've made it clear we cannot afford that, but we will get in the room, we will negotiate. A lot of this, Matthew, is about terms and conditions as well, about the way in which we retain
do to stop Matthew and others going to Australia or Canada or elsewhere that he referenced?
Well, I think we need to settle a dispute. We need to get our waiting list down, which Matthew referenced, the 40,000 appointments each and every week, additional. Matthew, they will be...
But that's about a 1.5% lift in appointments, isn't it, initially? Again, that was pointed out to you on Friday.
40,000 a week is 2 million a year.
Yes.
We've got just under about 8 million on the waiting list. We will clear that waiting list in the 5 years of a Labour government if we get over the line. And Nick,
the annual total, though, it's only a small percentage. I appreciate that it will attack the waiting list, but the overall total, is it ambitious enough?
Yeah, if we can get that waiting list down, it is out. When we were last in government, we brought waiting lists down to the lowest level, and satisfaction in the NHS was at its highest. It is the complete reverse now, the highest ever waiting lists and the lowest level satisfaction. And Matthew, this matters for all the... I mean, my wife obviously works in the NHS, so I've got a pretty good line of sight in one of the big London hospitals. The waiting lists are bearing down on the staff because all the time they've got this backlog. It is really making a difficult job even more difficult.
Let's get a quick one-line response from you, Matthew, if you would, sir.
I mean, I just cannot emphasise how dire the situation is. The morale at the moment in the workforce. Finally, medical students, 1 in 3 from a recent BMA survey said they intend to leave the NHS after 2 years of initial foundation training post-graduation, and they haven't started work yet.
Okay. I'm grateful to you, Matthew. Thank you for the work you do. I hope we can encourage you to stay in this country because we need as many good folk like you. Thank you for the work you're putting in. Let's move to the next call. Sid's in Caister in Lincolnshire. Sid, you're through to Sir Keir Starmer. Go ahead. Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Good
morning, Sid. Morning.
Morning. My question is, you said you're not going to raise income tax, VAT or national insurance, but what about council tax and pensions? Like at the minute you get 25% tax-free on your private pension. Will you be reducing that figure so you'll end up paying more tax when you draw your pension?
Yeah, Sid, on the question of tax, we've been really clear we're not going to be raising tax on working people. So as you rightly that means no increase in income tax, in national insurance and in VAT.
Council
and
tax?
Then, well, on top of that, Sid, the approach we've taken is this. We've published our manifesto with our plans in it, Sid. Every single thing in that document is fully costed and fully funded. So we've worked out how much it will cost and we've worked out or explained where the money will come from. There are some tax rises, Sid, so we want to get rid of the non-dom status properly. That's where the super rich don't pay their tax in this country. We want to get rid of the private equity loophole, which again is used by those that are pretty wealthy to avoid paying the income side of tax. Okay. And we want a better windfall tax on oil and gas companies. But beyond that, Sid, none of our plans require a tax rise because our focus is on growth. So, Sid, none of our plans require tax rises over and above the ones we've set out.
So you can say now there will not be an increase in council tax?
Look, Nick, what I'm not going to do is sit here 2 and a bit weeks before the election and write the budgets for the next 5 years. What I can say is that none of our plans require a tax rise, and that is for a reason. And the reason is our focus is on getting our economy going, on building, on growing, on raising living standards and creating wealth.
You're declining to take the opportunity to say that council tax will not increase. So I can put it to you that it will increase. And you can say I don't know.
Nick, it would be foolish to write 5 years worth of budgets before going through to 2029.
But you do realise, respectfully, every time you say we're not going to raise VAT, we're not going to raise it, and everybody says, what about council tax? You say, well, I honestly can't. You know what people are thinking. You're a bright bloke. Council tax will go up.
Yeah, well,
Clearly it will.
No, Nick, that isn't
go
our
up.
plan. No, Nick, none of our plans require a tax rise.
Will it go up or when to go up, Sir Keir?
None of our plans require a tax rise. No, Nick, because I do need to explain this.
I think you've had your time, respectfully. On the pensions.
I know that the temptation is always to say to politicians, you're going to raise tax. You're going to raise tax or you're going to reduce spending. They aren't the only levers available in government.
What is a working person?
A working person...
Simon Cowell?
Well, a working person is someone who works their living...
I've got that.
And uses our public services. The person I have in mind,
Simon Cowell.
The person I have in my mind, Nick, when I say working people, is people who earn their living, rely on our services, and don't really have the ability to write a cheque when they get into trouble. So the sort of people I'm meeting pretty well every day now. I met a couple in Stafford, a paramedic and her wife who works in a jewellery shop. Right. Their mortgage has just gone up several £100s and they don't have money in the bank to pay for it. They're the people I have.
Someone who works, who cannot write a cheque when they get into trouble.
And therefore relies on our public services like the NHS, etc. It's quite a big group because these days there are many people people, obviously not so well off, even better off these days, particularly when it comes to mortgages. But because it is important in politics, who do you have in your mind's eye? And I have all those people who, for the cost of living crisis, in Southampton yesterday, I had a woman who, she's got one job, she's trying to get another job, and the bills are still bearing down on her. That's the sort of person that I have in my
and therefore relies on our public
in my mind's eye.
When Sid asks about pensions, in your 132-page manifesto, you talk of a review of the pension landscape. What does that mean?
Well, it means that we'll look. I mean, obviously,
I know it means you'll look at it, but I mean in more detail. Are we going to be looking at pension funds, asset managers, insurers, banks?
No, we're going to look across the board at pensions to make sure that they.
So we're looking at taxation of pension funds?
No, Nick,
we're
not. None of our plans require taxation. I understand this is a different approach, and that Labour leaders in the past might have come on saying, yes, tax. We're not going to do that. We're going for growth. The missing ingredient here is that our economy has been flatlining for 14 years, and we need to turn that around to get the growth we need. That's why we want to build 1.5 million houses. We want to get GB Energy up and running so energy costs come down. We want to make sure that we fix the waiting lists so that people can be back into work. We want a back to work plan for welfare. All of these are intended to ensure that our economy grows. Because if we had grown the economy in the last 14 years at the same rate as the last Labour government, we would have tens of billions of pounds for our public services without raising taxes. That's the road I want to go down.
Let's go to Emma in Greenwich. Thanks, Sid, for your call. Emma's in Greenwich, through to Sir Keir. Go ahead, Emma. Morning to you.
Hi, good morning.
Hi, Emma.
Thanks for having me on. Hi, Keir. I wanted to know, how are you going to protect single-sex spaces for women and girls while at the same time making it easier for people to get a gender recognition certificate?
Oh, Emma, I passionately think we should protect single spaces for women and girls. That's something I've been clear about for a very long time, Emma. I was chief prosecutor between 2008 and 2013, running the prosecutions in England and Wales. We had a lot of cases involving, for example, violence against women and girls. And I know firsthand from my experience then just how important safe spaces are. And so that is very important to us. In relation to the proposal we've got in our manifesto in relation to gender, that is the process that we will put in place. But it doesn't cut across safe spaces. They're very, very important, and we will protect them.
Quick response from you, Emma, before we move on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how the two can marry up, because single-sex spaces are at threat now, and we've got boys and men at grassroots sports and women's sports at grassroots level. We've got single-sex spaces being turned into mixed-sex spaces. That's happening right now, and you're going to make it easier for people to change. Well, you can't change sex. Human beings can't change sex. So a gender recognition certificate it doesn't change reality. So it's not. The two policies don't match.
Let's put that to Sir Keir. The two policies don't add up. Sir Keir?
Well, Emma, they do, because I think you can always say safe spaces for, and should say safe spaces for women and girls, whether that's in sports for the sports bodies, whether that's in the work I did, particularly in the support refuges and other places for those that have been subjected to violence, physical or sexual. It's very, very important that we preserve that. Or indeed in our hospitals. It's actually NHS policy for wards to be single sex, and the only reason that isn't routinely the case now is because the government's lost control of our hospitals. But that is the policy, and we want to reinforce and to protect that, Emma.
So if I was identifying as a woman and I went to my NHS hospital, would I be allowed to be on a woman's ward if I identified as a woman?
No, it's a single sex ward. That
if
is
I had
the
my
NHS
gender recognition certificate, I'd be allowed to on a woman's ward.
You would be accommodated, but not on a woman's ward. And
Where
that's
will I
why,
go?
Well, hospitals already do this. There are ways that this can be done.
What sort of ways?
Well, lots of wards have side rooms, that sort of thing.
Side rooms? I get a side room if I had a gender recognition certificate, do I?
Nick, I mean, I've obviously spent quite a lot of time in hospitals. Many wards have the traditional beds laid out in that way. That is single sex. Many wards these days do have side rooms for general use, and they can be accommodated. But the rule about single sex wards or the policy is already there. The only reason, Emma, that there's any issue these days is because the government's lost control of our hospitals.
All right. Let's go to... Thank you, Emma. Let's go to some of the emails, texts and tweets. Penny in Sunderland, why will Sir Keir not scrap the 2-child benefit limit? Am I right in saying you won't? I better check that Penny's right. Will you scrap the 2-child benefit?
We won't, Nick. It's been a difficult decision, this, because we will have a policy for reducing and eliminating child poverty. That's what we did when we were last in government, and we'll put one in place. But we, Penny, I know not on the line, but obviously getting her message across. Yeah. It's a difficult one, but we don't have a magic wand. There isn't money available. Everything has to be fully costed and fully funded, and we're not able to do that, Penny and others who will be listening who are concerned. But it is a difficult one. I accept that because, you know, child poverty is a driving issue. I think there are things we can do straight away in relation to housing, in relation to bills, the cost of living crisis, the support that we put in for our children.
For poverty, children in poverty.
Oh, we need more housing, Nick. This is
Can't build them overnight, Sir Keir.
No, but we cannot go on like this. I've now been an MP for 9 years. Half my mailbag, coming in by email these days, obviously, of people contacting my constituency are parents with 2 or 3 children in a 1 or 2 bedroom flat. I kid you not. That is intolerable. It means there's huge health issues and growing up issues, and it means inevitably, and I've seen this so many times, by the time they're in their early teens, there will be a letter from the school saying your child isn't doing very well because you haven't got anywhere for them to do their homework. We cannot go on like that, which is why we need to build 1.5 million homes, and we've got the plan to do it if we're elected into government.
But if we come back to this 2-child benefit, you know that Gordon Brown is opposed to this, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Angela Rayner, calls it obscene. Your colleague Jonathan Ashworth calls it heinous. Nigel Farage is ahead of this, of course. He would say that he would actually scrap the 2-child benefit. Why are you behind Nigel Farage on this?
I think Nigel Farage accepts that he hasn't really funded any of his manifesto, and that's fine. If you don't fund your manifesto, you just say you can have anything you like or anything you think is important. We have taken the careful approach, saying every single thing that we are putting in a manifesto is fully costed and fully funded, and we're going to say before the election the things that we can't afford to do because of the damage to our economy. This is a tough one. I know how strongly Gordon Brown feels about it, and I know why he feels strongly about it. But I think one of the problems in politics is that before an election, people say, I'm going to do A, B and C, and then after the election, they don't do it. I want to take a different approach. It's be honest with people and look them in the eye and say, look, before you vote, I'm going to tell you some of the things I can't do.
Let me take a different call, if I may. Thank you for that. Graham in Bushy. Graham, you're on the radio. Good morning.
Hi, good morning here.
Hi, Graham.
Hi. You were happy to serve in Jeremy Corbyn's shadow cabinet from 2016. Without the waffle about believing Labour wouldn't win the 2019 election, just give me a simple yes or no answer. Had Labour won the election in 17 or 19, would you be happy to serve in the cabinet under Prime Minister Corbyn?
Well, I didn't think we'd win either of those, Graham, and there's no getting away from that. And certainly,
just a simple yes or no. If you were part of the shadow cabinet, would you have been happy to serve in his cabinet if he won?
Well, Graham, it's a pure hypothetical. It didn't cross my mind because I didn't think we would win. But let me just...
So you campaigned for him because you thought you wouldn't win?
Look, I campaigned for Labour because I've campaigned for Labour in every election, and I wanted good colleagues to be returned.
But had they won? Graham's is a fair point. Had they won, would you have accepted a post in Mr Corbyn's cabinet?
I don't think we were going to win. I don't think anybody thought we were going
very bright
to win.
Man. You know that's not answering the question, Sir Keir. Had they been successful, would you have taken a cabinet post?
Look, Nick, it's a hypothetical. I didn't think we would win. I did take a post. Look, I served for 3 years in the shadow Brexit role because I thought that was a very important issue for our country.
But would you have followed him into government?
Look, it's hypothetical. If we got it over the line, because I didn't think it would happen. But look, if we'd got it over the line, there were important things that I thought needed to be done from the front bench to continue and complete on the Brexit work, to make it absolutely clear that the Labour Party never deviated from our position on NATO, and to do the necessary work on anti-Semitism. But Nick, as we went into that 2019 election, I genuinely did not think, and I think I wasn't alone in this, that Labour would win that election.
You described the Conservative manifesto as almost Corbyn-like, throwing everything in the wheelbarrow. It was uncosted. But James Schneider, who was Director of Strategic Communications, saw you in the room when it was effectively signed off. He told us that.
Nick, after the election, we had a leadership...
But the manifesto, you were there, you nodded, we are told, you nodded ahead with Jeremy Corbyn as that manifesto went through.
I was in the manifesto meeting because I was responsible for the Brexit section.
So you
and
agreed
only
to
the
an
Brexit
uncosted
section.
window wheelbarrow manifesto?
Nick, it was Jeremy Corbyn's manifesto. My manifesto is very, very different.
I'm not suggesting it's not.
No, but Nick, after the event, after we lost that badly, we did have a sort of soul-searching in the Labour Party. And amongst the reasons, we actually did a report on this that was commissioned for me, and one of the things that was very, very clear coming back from the voters was we didn't think that this manifesto was deliverable because there was too much in it and it didn't seem credible, even though some of the policies people liked. Now, that was the work we did after the election, and we're not going to make that mistake again.
All right, OK. We need to break for news. Sir Keir, coming back with more of your calls. 9:32 here on LBC. News headlines then from Thomas Watts.
Sir Keir Starmer's told LBC he would seek a better agreement with the EU under a Labour government. He's also called on junior doctors in England to cancel their pre-election strike, promising to take a different approach to end the dispute. And he's also refused to rule out allowing a rise in council tax.
None of our plans require tax rises over and above the ones we've set out.
So you can say now there will not be an increase in council tax?
Look, Nick, what I'm not going to do is sit here 2 and a bit weeks before the election and write the budgets for the next 5 years. What I can say is that none of our plans require a tax rise.
And Sir Keir's defended his policy to levy VAT on private school fees, describing it as a tough choice to help fund state education. The Labour leader's been taking your questions in an exclusive phone-in, with more to come after the news. Rishi Sunak will be here to face the same test tomorrow morning. LBC weather: dry with sunny spells for many, showers in Scotland and across parts of central and northern England, a high of 22 degrees.
This week on LBC.
Join me, Rishi Sunak, as I take your calls on LBC.
I'm Keir Starmer, and I'm looking forward to taking your calls.
Good morning, Sir Keir.
Good morning, Connor.
Sir Keir, I want to know how you're going to settle the junior doctor dispute.
I really question that the Labour Party do not care about these children.
Yeah, Michelle, let me just set out what our policy is and then come to the point you rightly make.
As Britain decides, this is your chance to put your questions directly to our next Prime Minister. With me, Nick Ferrari, exclusively on LBC.
My question for Rishi Sunak would be, what are you going to do about NHS waiting times?
What are you going to do about housing?
Your government has lost my trust, so what are you going to do to win it back?
Only LBC lets you question the next PM.
Continues with Rishi Sunak tomorrow morning from 7 on Nick Ferrari at Breakfast.
Listen on your radio and on Global Player.
LBC.
Oh, that's exactly what's happening. Sir Keir Starmer taking your calls. Johan, you're the next caller. One from me, though, if I may. Just to go back to what we were hearing about Mr Corbyn, and indeed your position has changed from benefits. This is what some people would say gives you the nickname of the flip-flop or Captain Flip-Flop, because I take you back to your pledges when you were running to be leader in 2020. You talked about nationalisation of rail, mail, water. Was that a promise made in bad faith?
No, it wasn't. But
so without COVID in Ukraine, you'd have done it?
Look, we got 5 years have passed pretty well since then. The world has changed, the economy has changed, and my job was to drag our party towards the country, so we could always say country first, party second. So what I've done, Nick, is to look at everything that we've put on the table previously and say, does it pass my test now, which is country first, party second? On nationalisation, since you raised it, I mean, when we had the energy bills going through the roof 2 years ago, I said to my team, we've got to do something, because this is for individuals and families and businesses, this is going to ruin them. And we looked at a windfall tax, which gave a yield. And then I said, mock up how much it would cost to renationalise energy versus cutting the bills by putting in place a cap on the bills. We could have then, and I got them both mocked up. The choice then was to use the money 2 years ago in the middle of this crisis to pay off the shareholders. My team told me we can do that, but that means you can't lower a single bill for any individual or business across the country. Or you can scrap that and argue for a cap so people's bills are capable of being paid. Now, that But common sense is a big part of my politics. I wasn't going to say, because 3 years earlier I'd said something about nationalisation, I'm afraid we're going to pay off the shareholders and not reduce bills on people who can't afford their bills.
Okay.
And that's a practical sort of common sense approach.
So those 10 pledges, scrap tuition fees, scrap the House of Lords, renationalise. Are you Groucho Marx? Those are my principles, and if you don't like them, I have some others.
No,
Are you the Groucho Marx of politics?
I had to pick up my party after the worst election since 2019, turn it inside out, and change it. And the other thing that we lost 4 elections in a row. 2019 was only the last of them. And then I lost Hartlepool as a by-election shortly after I was elected leader, and that was like a blow in the stomach. And I took the decision then, it has to be country first, party second. Right. And everything will now be put through that prism. And if it fails that test, then we're not doing it. And I'm not going to apologise for that, because that is what has allowed us to put the Labour Party in a position to fight this election and to credibly form what I hope will be the next government. So I'm not going to apologise for that.
Sir Keir, thank you. Let's go to the next caller. Johan is in Braintree. Johan, you're through to Sir Keir Starmer. Go ahead. Morning to you.
Good morning, Sir Keir. Good morning
Johan.
to you. As a paid-up Muslim member of the Labour Party all my life, I'd like to know, will you be playing any part in bringing some sort of solution to Palestine atrocity being played in Israel and in Palestine by the both parties? And I also like to know, when will you be accept or recognising the state of Palestine?
Johan, thank you for raising this. I'm absolutely clear that there needs to be an immediate ceasefire. The hostilities need to end because we've got an appalling situation in Gaza. Hostages still being held. I dread to think what state they're in. And we've got tens of thousands of people who have been killed, Palestinians, many of them women and children, and intolerable, catastrophic humanitarian crisis. So we need that to stop. We need the hostages to be brought out, and we need that humanitarian aid to come in at speed and at volume, because it's such an awful situation. But Johan, on the wider point you put to me, which is what's the duty? If we are able to form a government, Johan, it will be important to me and to a Labour government that we play our full part in resolving this for the long term, and that means a two-state solution. It means a political process.
In a two-state solution, who's going to give up the land?
We need, firstly, on Johan's point about recognition of Palestine, we need a viable Palestinian state, and we need a safe and secure Israel. We don't have either of those things at the moment, either of them. The Palestinian state needs to be
to give up land.
Well, Nick, I'm not going to sit on air and make decisions about land, but we have to find a resolution to this. Johan, we do need to recognise Palestine as part of the process, and it's not in the gift of Israel. But equally, Israel needs to be safe and secure, and it is not safe and secure at the moment. But Johan, I can tell you, should we win this election, and obviously no seat has been won yet, it will be part of our duty, solemn duty, to play our full part in resolving this. And if I am Prime Minister, I will take up that duty.
Why do you suppose you've lost the trust of some Muslim voters?
Look, because feelings about Gaza are run very, very deep. I do think, actually, the vast majority of people now are in the same place as us in relation to a ceasefire, in relation to getting hostages out and getting humanitarian aid in.
Is there a time frame you have in mind?
Well, there's obviously some negotiations going on at the moment, as we know, involving the US. I would want us, I'm obviously talking to international leaders, as you would expect. I'm not getting ahead of myself, but it is important that I'm across those discussions. That needs to happen straight away. And
as the calls start coming in, if you are successful, and one comes from Benjamin Netanyahu, what would you say concerning Gaza when he offers you his congratulations? What would you say?
Well, I would say what I've just said. Obviously, I would talk to him. I'm talking to senior leaders in Israel, as you would expect, Nick, as I'm talking to senior politicians in the US and across the Arab countries who play a really important part on this. So, since October the 7th, I have been talking to international leaders, again, not trying to get ahead of myself, but making sure that we're fully involved in such discussions as are going on to bring about an end to this terrible conflict.
We have one last. Thank you, Johan. There's one last question on this issue. Annie's in Carnforth. Is it? Yes, Carnforth. Go ahead, Annie. Your question.
Annie.
Hello. Israel's been put on a blacklist of countries that harm children during conflict. Will you stop British arms being sold to Israel immediately?
Well, Annie, so far as arms are concerned, there are a number of licences that allow arms to be sold to Israel. They need to be reviewed. The government has, in fact, got legal advice on this in relation to what's being sold and what it's being used for. We've asked the government for access to that advice. They're not going to give it, and we're in an election now, so I'm not expecting it. But if we get over the line, we will look at that.
So you can't make a decision without looking at legal advice on selling arms to Israel?
Nick, it depends what is actually being exported. Let me give you an example. If something is being exported for purely defensive reasons, you've seen the Iran attack on Israel. That is materially different to something which is being used, let's say, in a Rafah offensive.
What they do with their missiles once we sell them?
Well, Nick, what happens with these licences, because the government hasn't given me access to their review, which is fair enough, but I have access to the process. Each licence is reviewed one by one, what is within this licence.
So you wouldn't ban
and what it has been. We'll do the review and look at it, but where it's being... Look, on...
A lot of reviews going on.
Well, Nick, no, this is taken really seriously in government. Each licence is looked at one by one, and in the past, decisions have been made not to sell arms to Israel, and where that's necessary, that's a decision that we would take. But I know how the process works. I know how carefully it's worked through. I don't have access to those licences. I don't have access to the detail. I hope before too long that we might, and we will then review it.
OK. Abby in Paddington, does Sir Keir Starmer agree with the use of the word genocide?
In what sense?
I imagine in Gaza, Israel committing genocide in Gaza.
Well, look, I've said repeatedly, Israel has to exercise its right to self-defence within international law. No, Abby, and anyway, I'm not going to sit in an LBC studio and pronounce that something is either genocide or not. And I'll tell you for why, Nick.
You can't decide about the guns, the weapons. I'm sorry, you can't decide about genocide. Why,
Nick? Allow me, please. In the fall of Yugoslavia, all sorts of atrocities were committed. I represented Croatia in the International Court for 3 months, where we argued about genocide. We reviewed 3 months' worth of evidence. At the end of that, the court itself then had to make a decision based on all of the evidence. That's how it works. Not politicians sitting looking at clips, bits of footage here and there, and coming to decisions based on that. It has to be Israel. Every country has to be held properly to account in accordance with international law, but the body that does that is the International Court that's set up in order to do so. And having literally argued in court for 3 months over the meaning of genocide, the evidence of genocide, I'm very well aware of what it is. I'm also very, very well aware that you need to have the evidence in front of you before you come to a final decision.
Let's go to Robbie in Chingford. Robbie, you're through to Sir Keir. Your question. Morning to you.
Yes.
Hi, Robbie.
Hi, morning. Hello. I wanted to know, I run a foundation that's driven by a youth board. They've emailed you a couple of times. You haven't replied. If they were here now, they would ask, what are you going to do about funding more RSE and PSE in schools in terms of prevention through education on violence against women and girls to avoid geography teachers their spare time. It's at an all-time crisis.
I've got to move you to your direct question, if you would, Robbie. I'm terribly sorry. And the line broke a bit.
Sorry, I've just missed a slight bit on the line, Robbie. Apologies.
Your key question.
Can you fund RSE and PSE properly in schools? It's in dire straits.
Yes, we need that funding in our schools in relation to, I think you mentioned violence against women and girls. The line was a little bit crackly.
Yes.
But Robbie, that is very important. We want to put more support in this area, actually, Robbie, and that means mental health support in our secondary schools, because for many young teenagers, it's a vital time in relation to violence against women and girls, but also other issues. So more support in. I would also go further, Robbie, and want to have specialist training for teachers generally, so that they're more acquainted with some of these issues, particularly things like trauma. We did a version of this in Camden, and it really paid dividends. So, Robbie, I feel very strongly about this passionately, and we'll put that support in.
Robbie, thank you. Sir Keir, you may be aware we've just passed the first anniversary of the terrible events in Nottingham that resulted in the deaths of 2 students and a school taker just months from his retirement. You were very strong about this at the time. We've had a voicemail from Emma Webber, the mother of Barnaby Webber, one of the students who lost his life.
Hello, Keir. This is Emma Webber. I'm Barnaby's mum. He was one of the Nottingham attack victims, and I'm speaking on behalf of the families because I wanted to ask, following our meeting with you in January of this year, and also various members of your shadow cabinet, if you do get into Downing Street, what your thoughts are about following through with the call for a public inquiry or possibly a jury and judge-led inquest. And also your thoughts, please, on the urgent need to reform our homicide laws and also the victim support in this country, which from bitter experience I can confirm is woeful and very inadequate. I'll be very interested to hear your continued thoughts. Thank you.
Yes, Emma, that was a recording.
It's a recorded message. She can't be with us.
Met Emma.
She referenced that, and your colleagues have as well.
Yeah, and just a horrific experience that she and all the family members and friends have been
she's keen for legal reform, an area you know well.
She wants a judge-led inquiry, and I said when I met her that I thought that was the right way forward, and we would do that.
You will commit to that.
Because I was very concerned when I heard from her directly about the way the system had let her and the other family members down in relation to the charges that were brought, the communications with the family, and so many other aspects. It was a really difficult meeting, Nick, if I'm honest, just listening to what they had been through. And my resolve is to ensure that we have that inquiry and make sure that that doesn't happen to anyone else. I've had too many examples of victims and family members being let down. We have to improve here.
All right, coming to the next call, Matthew. Just allow me a moment, if you would, Matthew. I want to refer you to a couple of the front pages of this morning's newspapers. The Daily Express, banking giants' dire warning on Labour pledges. This is HSBC. I don't think you get a bigger bank, suggesting that people's mortgages could go up, a higher minimum wage could increase costs and reduce efficiency, adding to unit labour costs, says HSBC. You got your sums right? The bank says you haven't.
Well, I think what they are attacking is our proposal for better rights for people at work.
And a lift in the wage as well, which they say will be passed on, obviously, through costs.
Look, I think that everybody is entitled to respect and dignity at work and to be properly protected. I had a family member, Nick, who during COVID didn't get sick pay in their contract. That meant that every time that she had to self-isolate, she couldn't afford a day off, so she used her holiday up. That is not acceptable. That's what happens if you don't properly protect people at work, and I don't think that's right. But also, when I talk to businesses, everything in our package is stuff that good businesses are already doing, because guess what? They know that if you treat your workforce properly, productivity goes up, not down.
Well, HSBC
so
says
this is good for the economy.
Into reducing headcount or sustain lingering inflation pressures, keeping the bank rate higher for longer, obviously leading to increased mortgages.
I just don't agree with that. I just do not agree with that.
HSBC and this is
wrong? Yes, they're wrong about that. Okay. I have talked to, I don't know how many businesses about this. Okay. And when I take them through our plans, most of them say that's the stuff we're already doing. But what we can't do is leave people unprotected at work. Look at what happened to the P&O workers, for heaven's sake.
Outrageous.
And it's still outrageous, still there, and nothing was done about it.
The Daily Telegraph says, their front page says that Boris Johnson is the new secret weapon in the Conservative campaign. He's going to be writing a letter to floating voters in key constituencies.
Oh, for heaven's sake. What is this? The third or fourth relaunch of their strategy in 6 weeks? They started saying vote Tory because we're going to win. Then they said vote Tory because Labour's going to win. Now they're going to say something about Boris Johnson. Honestly, if you can't even have a strategy that holds for 6 weeks, you really don't deserve to win.
Steve's in Blackpool. You're through to Sir Keir Starmer. Go ahead, Steve. Morning to you.
Morning, Sir Keir.
Hi,
morning,
Steve.
Nick. So if the intention of the Labour government is to repeal the Legacy Act for Northern Ireland, that's going to be targeted towards veterans who served for the government, who did what the government told them to do. Now, if they've committed crimes, then yes, they should be prosecuted. But does that mean that you're going to repeal the letters of comfort that were issued by the last Labour government to the IRA terrorists who committed murders and will face no prosecutions whatsoever? How can that be equal under the law?
Are you a vet yourself, sir? Are you a veteran yourself?
Yes, I am.
You served in Northern Ireland?
Yes, I did. Okay. So how can that be equal if you're just going to repeal an act that just means you're going to prosecute veterans, but you're not going to chase terrorists?
Well, Steve, thank you for your question. And you may or may not know that I worked in Northern Ireland for 5 years with the police service of Northern Ireland. So I've got quite a lot of knowledge and experience about the process in Northern Ireland and obviously the history of the conflict and the aftermath to it. In relation to this legislation, I'm against it for a number of reasons. The first is it doesn't have the support of any of the political parties in Northern Ireland. And knowing Northern Ireland in the way that I do, for a Westminster government to push through legislation which doesn't have the political support in Northern Ireland is the wrong way of doing business. The second thing, Steve, is this, that it doesn't have the support of the victims groups in Northern Ireland, and including victims of terrorists, including the IRA. The letters of comfort were given to some but not all, and there are terrorists who could be prosecuted. So this is
see military veterans in their 70s in court, Sir Keir.
Well, Nick, I do think there needs to be a resolution of this. I understand that. Nobody should be put in court if there isn't the evidence properly put through by the prosecution.
Some of these folk are probably in their 80s, certainly in their late 70s. But you want to see them in court?
Nick,
meanwhile, the letters of comfort go to the other side.
The letters of comfort went to a number of people, but not. Well, Nick, I would invite you to come with me perhaps to Northern Ireland and speak to the victims who say, how is it fair for us?
Let's speak to some of the veterans. How is it fair to them?
How is it fair for terrorists who could now be prosecuted, didn't get letters of comfort, not to be prosecuted in relation to our loved one? So there are very powerful arguments and counter-arguments here. I do want to find a way through this because I think in the end we have to find a way, but doing this in a way which doesn't have the approval of victims of terrorism in Northern Ireland, of terrorists of the IRA, and doing it in the teeth of the political parties in Northern Ireland, in my experience, having worked in Northern Ireland, is not a sensible way to proceed.
Thank you for that. I note in The Sun, you said last week how much you used to enjoy washing your late father's Ford Cortina, and you like to... Do you actually own a car?
I do, Nick.
So you do get to drive?
I've had a car since I was... First thing I bought with my £125 was a car. It was a Morris Minor. I grant you, one
gone up a bit now. I won't ask what it is.
One of our team had reasons. But I've had a car, so I still have a car.
Okay.
I've never not had a car.
How much is a litre of unleaded?
A litre of about £1.50, £1.47, something like that.
Near enough.
And we do fill up our own car, Nick. I've now got a security team, and therefore I can pay for it. I also can pay for shopping in Sainsbury's.
Right.
But I was brought up in the countryside in a rural area. Having a car was like Freedom Day. And so the only thing I wanted to do when I was growing up was pass my test,
you get it
save
first time?
up, second time. And
what did you fail on?
I can't now remember, but I was really irritated to fail. But I bought my car, and I've never not had a car ever since.
All right. Matthew's in Heathrow. Matthew, you're through to Sir Keir. Go ahead.
Hi, Sir Keir.
Hi, Matthew.
Good to talk to you again on LBC. Hopefully we'll still get the chance if you become the Prime Minister.
Let's get the chance. Any political colours. Go ahead.
Yeah, my question is, I've been to volunteer in Calais for charity, and what's your position on asylum seekers? Will you actually start safe routes to the UK?
Matthew, I'm glad you've raised the question of Calais. I myself have been into those camps. I went a number of years ago. I went on a dark and freezing February day. And my experience then, I think the camp I went to is now gone, but my experience at the time was it was freezing, it was cold, there were flimsy tents. As I was walking around, there was squelching sort of mud that was mixed with rain and urine and heaven knows what. And I saw two children, the same age as my children, go into a tent at about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon to sleep because there was no electricity. I then, Matthew, came back home and I looked in on my children, both in their separate bedrooms with the central heating on, sleeping soundly. And as a human being, that went right through me because nobody should be in that situation. That having been said, Matthew, we cannot allow people to cross by small boats over the channel. And you will know, Matthew, that vile gangs, are making a fortune putting very vulnerable people into boats that then come in, and we've had record numbers this year. We have to take those gangs down, and that's why we will set up a border security command, Matthew, to take down the gangs that run this vile exploitative trade.
Last couple of minutes together, you've referenced your children, and I absolutely respect you're fiercely protective of them. Will they move into number 10 with you?
We're not getting ahead of ourselves. We've got.
Why do we not see? I've had the privilege of meeting your wife. I have to say, I think I probably prefer her in the couple as it is. Why do we not see more?
You prefer her to me, effectively.
Yes, absolutely, I do. Yes, well, I've said quite plainly, I do. I prefer her. I'd much rather sit next to her at one of those charity dinners.
You're probably not alone.
Why don't we see more of her?
Well, Vic does quite a bit with me, but during this campaign, two things. One, she's working at the NHS in a hospital.
Indeed.
Two, Nick, and I don't make a lot of this because I do, is our boy's been doing his GCSEs.
Yes, I heard.
And therefore, we took the decision that whilst I was sort of out and about on the road, we wanted to create the environment where he could study calmly in ordinary circumstances
David Cameron
and get
in his
him to do
memoir.
it. And he finished his exams on Friday.
Good.
So
we wish him well. Wish the young man well. David Cameron said his wife Samantha was his fiercest critic after the TV debates. Is Victoria equally plain speaking? What advice has she given you?
She is very plain speaking and very down to earth.
What advice
but she's
has she
very
given you?
supportive. After the first debate, I was slightly frustrated because I didn't think the 45 seconds to answer a question really worked for me. Now I know why why the programme set it up in that way. And so I was pretty sort of, frustrated. I'm not good company when I'm in that place. And Vic sort of cheered me up on that one. On the second one, I thought it went a bit better, so I was happy with that.
Okay.
But yeah, no, she's very plain, and she's the person who gives me the straight advice every time.
All right. 10% Premier League transfer levy being looked at by Labour. That means Arsenal have to spend an extra...
No, we're not. Let me just kill that one. We're not looking at that, Nick.
Oh, your colleague said that she was.
I think she said we would... Thangham.
Yes.
She said we'd look at the Tracy Crouch proposals. Now, it's true
Speaking
that
to reporters, Shadow Sports Secretary Thangham Debonair said she would revive the controversial tax.
No, she said we'd look at the Tracy Crouch proposals. But look, let me just kill it dead. We're not looking at that. That isn't part of our plans for football governance.
Okay.
We will get that football governance bill in. It's much needed for fans, but that isn't part of it.
Finally, is there anything you admire of Rishi Sunak?
Yes. On the day he became Prime Minister, he insisted on picking up the phone to me, which he didn't have to do, personal one-to-one, and he was running late for time, so he was he was really busy, and he wanted to establish contact, and he wanted to say, and allow me to say, on things like Ukraine and national security, whatever other arguments we have in other parts of the forest, we will work together and we will share information. And to be fair, I've had pretty high-level security briefings throughout on Ukraine and other issues from him and his team. So, we'll fight hard in this campaign. I don't think he should continue as Prime Minister, but I do respect the fact that on a busy day he took the time and insisted on making sure they had that call on the day he was appointed Prime Minister.
Sir Keir Starmer, leader of the Labour Party, thank you. Now, as the general election coverage continues here on Nick Ferrari at Breakfast, we've already heard from Reform's Nigel Farage. Tomorrow, Rishi Sunak for the Conservatives in the chair. We'll also hear from Sir Ed Davey leading the Liberal Democrats, as well as key voices from Plaid, SNP and the Greens. Full list of all party leaders, go to lbc.co.uk/candidates. Missed any of today's show? Listen back on Catch Up on Global Player. My thanks again to Sir Keir. You're listening to LBC.